Hello Green and Emerald class, and welcome to our history lesson today based on the Olympics and the origins of the modern Olympic Games. Well, where and when did the Olympics start? Well, they started almost 3,000 years ago in ancient Greece as part of a religious festival, nothing to do with athletics to start with, back in ancient Greece in Olympia, which is very close to Mount Olympus, which is the highest peak highest mountain in ancient Greece. And don't forget that the ancient Greeks thought that their gods, the most important 10 of their gods, lived in a type of heaven near Mount Olympus. So it had a very big religious link. So they started 776 BCE, and they settled down. They stopped after a long time, and after the Greeks were invaded and defeated. And then, just over 100 years ago, they were reinvented, they restarted. So we'll have a little look at that today. And those events were now, from about 130 years ago, they're known as the modern games. Okay, they take big sort of traditions from those original Greek games. So the celebration to start with was for the two main gods. We've got Zeus and his wife Hera, very, very important gods for the people of Greece. And there were celebrations, and part of those celebrations were the athletics, and the events took place. First of all, it actually only was for a day, and it was a running event. It wasn't lots of different sports. It was just one running event, and just lasted for a day. So before these games began, because the ancient Greek city-states were arguing and at war with each other, and always having sort of skirmishes and little mini battles over their land, they had, because remember that their food land was quite restricted, and they put a message out to everybody a month before they were going to have the games, to say to everybody, like, stop arguing, stop warring, we're going to make the land safe so that everybody can travel to the religious celebration. And that's what the truce was. It was a sacred truce so that people could get to the religious festival, and because they believed that this was such a huge thing and it was so important, it overdid, it was much more important than the wars, so they stopped all of that to do this. And the original stadium was at Mount Olympus, as I said. And what you need to do is have a look at the photographs of this on. Be a really good idea to have a look at the BBC Bite Size website, and I've put a link into our school website for you to have a look at today. It's a little mini clip there that shows you a reconstruction of some games. And you'll notice that there's no women in those games at all, because women were banned from the games. If you were married, they stopped it completely, and you weren't allowed in, and you were actually banned and sort of banished. You could be killed, you could be flung off if you were found to be sort of sneaking around and having a look. They would actually, they had the right to go and sort of throw you off a cliff. So it was very key for it to be male only. There were games for women, but they were only for unmarried women, and they were completely separate to this. So the original stadium could hold up to 50,000 people, which by these days is a big representation. It's a big place. So in order to, if you've travelled everywhere in Greece, you'd have to stay over, and there was no hotels or anything like that. You would pitch up a tent and maybe just sleep in the sort of like in the back of it. So it was quite hot, it was quite uncomfortable, it was really crowded. Okay, so but still people went. It was that important. So the events at the games, they've really changed and um, come a long way since the initial, the start of the Greek games. So the first event, as I said, was a short race from one end of a stadium to the other. And then gradually over the years it turned into 4 days of competitions, and it included things like wrestling, chariot racing, javelin, discus and long jump. Okay, and we're going to have a look at some of those in a little bit more detail today and compare it to the modern events. And one of the most difficult events was the hoplites, who were made to do races with their full armour on and carrying their really heavy shields. Okay, so that was some race, because bearing in mind that the temperatures in Greece are extremely hot at times, so that would have been quite something. Okay, so we're going to have a look at the events, and so the first event there you can see is running, and the races were on. There were some long distance races. There were ones where you went from one end of the stadium to the other, and there was a post that you ran round. It reminded me of running in the playground and getting to the post at the end and then going back, or having it at home, having a home base. So lots of changes there. They ran barefoot, okay, and the next one along the top is the discus, which is a flat, it's almost like a plate shape, and the difference between those and the current, the modern discus, is the ancient Greek ones were probably about twice as heavy. They were really quite big. Okay, the modern discus, they fit into the shape in sort of like the size of a man's hand. Okay, and they're twice as light. So then you've got the javelin, and the javelin is based on a weapon, on a spear. Okay, so that's a modern take on the current javelin. Very similar. They had metal tip and a metal point at one end, and you're allowed to run up and throw. The one at the bottom that looks like he's got things he's holding in his hand. He has actually got weights in his hand, and this one, so it's this one here. This is like a long jump, okay, and the current long jump that you can do, the current games show that you can have a run up, and run as fast as you can, and then you lift off and you propel yourself through the air through the speed of that run. Okay, and if you watch long jumpers, they have like a sprint run up to get as much lift as they can. In ancient Greek days, you could not run, so you had weights in your hands to propel yourself through the air, and you had a flautist, the person playing the flute, to get the rhythm going so that you could get as much lift off the ground with those weights to help you. And as soon as you were in the ground, you flung the weights, and hopefully you didn't hit the poor flute player with your weights, knock him out. And then you arrived on the ground, and hopefully you went further than everybody else. So that's quite different, although it's still a similar sort of way of measuring out from one part to another, but very different strategy in actually moving forward. So the bottom one there with the two people wrestling or fighting, it's a little bit, there's a couple of events in the modern Olympics, and that's Judo is one, and we've got wrestling as well. And this was it's called Pankration, and it was a really vicious, what they call no holds barred wrestling match. So you could punch, you could kick, you could do anything apart from gouge people's eyes, and people died playing, in this sport, or so-called sport, and they used to forget about the rules and just be a really, really vicious, violent wrestling match. So quite different to the refereed point scoring systems of wrestling and judo these days. And then on the last one there, we've got chariot racing, which is, you can see a man in a little buggy with some horses pulling him along, and they were racing against each other. So you'd have probably up to 10, between 10 and 30 or 40 of these racing together, and it would obviously be the first. The winner would be the fastest, and that would be it. And winners had a different thing to, we get medals now, and that was different. Okay, so we'll have a little look at the modern games. The Greek games happened every 4 years, exactly as the modern days do. However, last year, when it was due for Tokyo in Japan, so the 4th year came up, and because of the global pandemic, it couldn't go ahead. So since 1894, every 4 years that's been happening, apart from last year. But it's good news on that, so I'll come to that later. So once the Greek Empire was defeated, as said, they were defeated in battle, the game stopped until 1894. Now athletes come from all over the world taking part in those different events, and the modern symbol of the Olympic Games is the 3 rings along the top and 2 at the bottom joined, and these represent the 5 continents or 5 areas of the world that joined in with those first modern Olympic Games over about 130 years ago. So here we go. Here's the modern long jumper. She is lifting herself from the board, so you get a certain type of place where you can't tread, and you lift off and you propel yourself forward using your arms and your momentum. And the ancient Greek games with the weighted jump, and you can see those in his hand, being, launching himself forward. And there is an equivalent with horse riding in the modern Olympic events. You have to do with the chariots. Obviously we've got the chariot racing, which I've talked about already. They have, although they don't have games where the horses are actually being ridden by the Olympians, and they don't race against each other. They race against the clock, so they're timed as they go round. They're also part of the pentathlon, which is a 5-event game that happens, and this is something that definitely came from the ancient Greek games. The pentathlon was a set of games that were played, and the current one is they're 5 very different sports. They are swimming, running, fencing, horse riding and shooting. Okay, but you've still got those horse riders in there. Here in the ancient Greek games, they used to celebrate the horses more than the chariot racer, and here it's all about the person riding the horse rather than the horse. So running, we know we've got big running tracks in that massive stadium. So the word stadia and stadium comes from the ancient Greeks, and here they are running. This looks like a relay game with a baton being passed. And then we come to the discus. And as I said, you can see by this that the size of the discus today, even though he's holding that back, it is a lot smaller. It's about half the size, and this is an ancient Greek, is a sculpture of an ancient Greek one, so this is twice as heavy. So there are similarities, but that's quite a nice fact for you to use later. And again, very, very similar sort of style going on for throwing the javelin, and based on a war spear. Okay. And then we come to the judo and the pankration. They said that they used to have this idea that the pankration came from the Theseus fighting with the Minotaur almost to the death, and it was really vicious, and that's what they said. That's what their sort of tradition was based on, and it was a really nasty event. You could be seriously injured. You couldn't bite and you couldn't poke, but you could punch and kick and choke and all sorts. Okay, so we've got the Olympic torch now, and this travels all the way around Greece, where the games would be taking place. And these days in modern Olympics, it goes to all the different countries, okay, that take part in the games. Then they used to light a torch, or like a candle type torch, outside the temple, and it was a way of telling everybody that this happened. And this, in modern Olympics, it's called like the eternal flame. It goes for the whole of the Olympic, the whole of the time that the Olympics are on. And there was no medals, no gold, silver or bronze for the first, second and third place. You had some leaves made from a tree, an olive tree from Mount Olympus, and it was for your glory. It was just for the thrill of having been and won. Okay. When you got back home afterwards, you were given a hero's welcome. There would be celebrations for you in the streets. And they would be allowed, if you won, you were allowed to marry rich women and get lots of invitation to the best meals and the best parties. So the modern Olympic Games, every 4 years, as I said. 2012 in London, UK, was the host city, and I was lucky enough to get some tickets for to watch some sport there, and it was absolutely amazing. And the British team for the sport that I went to watch did really well. They weren't expected to, so it's something that was really thrilling. And in 2016, so that's 5 years ago now, they were held in Rio. Now, as I said, 2020, they were cancelled because of the coronavirus, but they're back on 23rd of July 2021. It's going to restart, so that's exciting news. So for your Olympic task today, you're going to choose 4 Olympic sports out of the ancient Greek sports, out of the 6 that we had a little look at. You can label them, and you can complete a fact box for each one. And you see you've got on the page. Sorry, there's a lot going on in this house today. We've got the page is split into 4 sections, so you've got a little fact box and a longer one at the bottom in each section. So you can draw a lovely picture in here of one of those sports, and then here another, so you've got 4 to do. And do them nice and big in there so they really show up well. Then you can label them. You might want to put on the discus, and you might want to put in there, for instance, that the discus was twice as heavy as the modern sport. If it was the long jumper, you'd say that they used weights to help propel them forward. And then once you've done that, you can write some of your facts that you found out about the Olympic Games, and the bits that you really enjoyed, that are different to the Olympic Games that happen now. Okay. So you're writing facts about the ancient Olympic Games, but if you want to compare them to the modern times, that's absolutely fine as well. And then to make it very Greek, between these edges, you can make a nice decorated Greek style pattern. And we've got this it's almost like an inside and outside little leg pattern, which is really Greek, and I love that pattern. And you could do that round the edge or down the middle here. Okay. So that's your Olympic task for today, and that's it for me. I'm sorry this video went live late. Did have a few issues this morning, but hopefully that this is now fine, and you can get on with your work. All right, you take care now.